All right. Good evening, everyone. This is our community's house. We are all guests in it here to serve our community. My name is Mike Little, Mayor of the District of North Vancouver. I'm going to call to order the special meeting of council for Monday, October 23rd at 5 o'clock. I wanted to mention, this is listed as a special meeting of council in the agenda. And what that means functionally is just that we added it. So it wasn't on the regular meeting that was planned out, regular meeting schedule planned out back in January. It was an additional meeting in order to hear the financial plan proposal here tonight. And so it was added recently. And so that's why we call it a special meeting. Otherwise, it is generally going to function largely like a regular meeting of council. We actually do have we're going to start with the adoption of the agenda. So council, there's been an agenda that's been circulated. Any errors or omissions from the agenda as presented? Hearing none, will someone please move adoption? Moved by Councillor Back. Is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Forbes. I'll call the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. I will say that this meeting is being held in a hybrid fashion with members of council, the public, staff participating either in person or virtually, with Councillors Murray and Ma joining us here on the video system. That means the entire council is present for this meeting.
Mayor Little.
Yes, Councillor Murray.
I was just going to mention, I don't have the greatest connection, so I'm just going to turn my camera off, but if I have a question or I speak, I'll turn it back on.
That's completely fine. Thank you, Councillor Murray. All right, and so I will, although it's not normally a requirement of special meetings, I will see if there are any representations to be made from the public. We did have one person who expressed an interest in signing up, and so I was just looking to see if they were here virtually. Is Carmen Jensen on the meeting? Just confirm with the. No. We don't see Carmen Jensen. Corey Koss joining us virtually. Can we move Corey Koss over? I don't see Corey Koss on the panel. Yep, I can see Corey there. Corey Koss, can you hear me?
Yes, Your Worship. Can you hear me?
Clearly. Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Okay. This is a bit of a fun scan that I did. I just skimmed the fees and charges, the annual review of that. I see an overall increase of about 5%. This still seems to me at least excessive. I just wonder, doesn't anything get more efficient nowadays and we can reduce some costs? Anyway, the level of service as fed back by those who pay these fees, has that level of service improved? Do you ever ask people that you're getting these fees from that they feel they're getting a raw deal or a good deal? If not, why don't you ask them? Now, the graph of the total fees collected each year for the last 20 years, that kind of graph would be very informative to me. See what's going on and keep that, inflation along with that graph to see how it is above or below inflation. Now, scanning and printing costs up to 75 cents a page on page 9 or 15 of the report. And that really sounds excessive. Overall, the cost of printing in color of my home is now just well below. It's like 2 cents, certainly below the 10 cents a page we're used to. Since cameras are now so good, people have their phones, can't they just come in as clients and be allowed to snap the pages themselves? That would save a lot of money and effort and a waste of paper. The repeated justifications for some of these increases to fully recover the cost of development process seems to be a yearly event statement. They're never fully recovering it. That's why they're increasing them. the District of North Vancouver parking pass has been restored to $10. And I wonder what it was, in line with the recommendations of council, incidentally. Wow, I found it. It was $10.70. We saved a whole 70 cents on that one. Now, all the references to fees and exemptions of temporary outdoor businesses have been removed since that bylaw expired. But it seems like privatization of the public spaces then took a hit. But maybe not, when I read that all outdoor patios on road allowances are covered under the outdoor customer service area policy, which is nowhere to be found. And finally, I think I'll just end with this odd one. The annual bus pass for Lynn Canyon Park, up to 24 seats, costs $1,106.50 per year, but add one more seat and it costs you $412 extra. I'd like to see a linearization of that versus this, rather than an abrupt change all of a sudden. Happy to see that smoke, the false alarm still, first one, doesn't cost us any money. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cost. Would anybody else like to address the public portion of the meeting by raising your virtual hand? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move on with the regular part of the agenda. The first item up for consideration today is item 3.1. This is the annual review of fees and charges. And looking to staff for their introductory comments, please.
Thank you, Mayor Little. We have a brief.
Are you on the mic?
Good evening, members of council and to the public listening in. Tonight's special meeting is one of the steps in our annual financial process. Tonight, we're seeking to amend the fees and charges bylaw to ensure the fees and charges keep pace with rising costs and changes in the marketplace. And we're also seeking to amend the financial plan bylaw to ensure costs and funding reflect the latest information, council direction, and is in compliance with the community charter. Adopting these bylaws earlier helps us to establish a clear baseline for planning for the 2024 budget. So there's a number of advantages to moving forward more quickly with amending these bylaws. We would normally introduce the utility bylaws at the same time, but additional time is required this year for those bylaws. So they're going to be coming forward later in November. They're currently scheduled to come forward November 20th. As the changes in both these bylaws involve all departments, senior staff are available here to answer any questions council may have. But I will say that these bylaw amendments are largely technical in nature. The fees and charges bylaw is a well-structured best practice bylaw. And the process has been in place for quite a while now, and we think is working very well. And the financial plan amendment bylaw, we received direction from council throughout the year, and council had authorized additional contingency towards the end of last year. And so we're just working within the financial framework that has been approved by council for that bylaw. So with that said, I'll move to the fees and charges portion. As I mentioned, we review this every year, and as the member of the public was speaking to, we do have a process in place that focuses on cost recovery. So there's a thorough process that starts in the summer and culminates in this amendment bylaw coming before council. We are seeking a 5% increase to fees, which is approximately $850,000 in new revenue. Every additional percentage is approximately $170,000 in revenue. In our opinion, we're staying true to the principle of cost recovery and our normal practices with setting fees, and a 5% increase is recommended this year following those practices. And obviously inflation still remains high. And so looking back and looking forward, the rate we're recommending for this year to keep pace works out to 5%. There are a few highlights in the bylaw, which are laid out in the next couple of slides. We're advancing climate emergency action and trying to remove barriers with electrical permits and EV charging. We're also introducing fees for public charging stations. And that will partially offset that reduction in revenue through the electrical permits. There are a few new fees that are being introduced, finishing permits for completion of expired permits, and some additional fees for the Ecology Center and Maplewood Farm just to stay current with business trends. In terms of cost recovery, there's an annual review with the engineering department, make sure that their costs reflect the latest increases. And so those construction fees are updated. And there are changes to the wharf and anchorage fees as well. Those increases look high, but overall, the fees we believe come in at a reasonable amount. There are a number of charges there depending on the status of the abandoned boat in this case. And so there's a process that boat will go through and charges that follow throughout that process. There are no change to the outdoor recreation fees. All we're doing here is putting them into the bylaw, and we're undertaking a recreation fees and charges framework study. And we'll be moving forward with that next year. Various fees to development and permitting and the outdoor business areas has been removed and is now covered under the outdoor customer service area program, which is administered by the planning properties and permits department. And with that, I'll turn it back to
Okay.
you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you
And
very
We're
much.
happy to take any questions that you might have.
Yeah, I've got a few questions, if I may. I mean, it's in the way this is presented, I get it's presented like this every year, which is helpful for benchmarking and comparing year over year. I still feel like it's missing a column, which would be what the total scope is, like how much money we raise from that particular fee. I don't, are we, the hauling fees, the towing fees, all of these different pieces, are they actually a significant portion of our revenue, or are they the kinds of things that are extremely minor in our operations, but maybe unduly hit one person necessarily, and therefore, it's hard to make that kind of a judgment if we don't have a column that covers how much we actually made in fees in that column the year before. And that might be helpful to see how broad these are. Otherwise, it's just a very long list of fees. I noted that the rec fees were being brought in as new fees, but they're from other sources originally, so they're not contemplated to increase. These don't, because there's no column saying that they've increased, so those don't represent an increase. That's just a straight over transfer. That okay, thank you for that. The question I had about the last one on that page is public direct current fast charging station, $16 per hour. Where do we have that infrastructure, and $16 per hour sounds excessive for a charging fee. I mean, if you talk about, I mean, most even high capacity cars wouldn't actually sit there for an hour. They'd only charge for about 25 to 35 minutes on a high capacity charger. So we're going to charge them $16 to park at that facility.
Your worship, we worked with the climate office on that charge. We understand that's the comparable rate that's out in the marketplace, but we could certainly follow up on that and provide some additional information. I don't believe Ms. Jackson is listening in tonight.
I am listening in, Your Worship, if you'd like me to make a comment.
Oh, I'm going to have to, have you speak directly into the microphone. It's not quite coming in clear in the hall here, but welcome, Carolyn Jackson. Do you have a comment on that fee?
Yeah, your worship, the fee is consistent with fees that are charged by other municipalities in the region. And while we don't currently have any fast charging stations, we do have plans to install. And we want to be managing and at those facilities. So that's the sort of background behind the charge. We did do quite a good survey of what some of our municipal partners, like the city of Vancouver and the city of North Vancouver, are charging. And that fee is consistent with fees in the region. We don't typically see the vehicle parked there for a full hour. So it's really more of a per minute charge, but it works out to that as a per hour rate.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, well, I generally support us, largely reflecting inflation in our fees and charges. If I was to break out one that I find a lot of feedback from the community, that a great deal of frustration, it's the $500 first offense for leaving your garbage can outside of the regulation hours. It's so high that I don't think our staff actually give it out very frequently because they know how punishing it is. And maybe a more moderate first step fine would be more appropriate, considering that before, when we had a first offense charge, our recidivism rate was less than 10%. So 90% of the people who got that first charge didn't have a second offense. And so it was a very effective piece. And I receive a lot of complaints about those fees, and also complaints that we aren't actually ticketing stuff that's put out in advance. And so, I think if we had an option with a more modest fee associated with it, then we might be able to ticket it more frequently wherever it's needed. But also, if people change their behavior, then they're not unduly punished for it. $500 is a massive penalty when you consider. I think we, at one point, although I didn't search it out looking up for this, but there was, I think the fee for abusing an animal was about $350, but the fee for leaving out a garbage can was $500 at one point. That may be going back several years, but it does seem to be a little out of line for first offense. And so I'm wondering, we have another meeting coming up on these issues in November 20th or something, sorry, November 20th. Would it be possible to propose an additional fee in there that would be a first time offense fee for waste? Looking over at engineering.
Through your worship, yes, we have the utility rate bylaws coming forward, which so council will have another kick at that. The previous council were really strong on that issue, and I know your worship, you had a different view, but we can bring back the current numbers. The thought at that time was we'd sort of gone as far as we could on the education side of it, and there was a desire to come down heavy on the fees, but we can put the numbers together from last year's experience and bring that forward as part of the utility rate discussion.
I get that one stands out, but it's even when you talk to the rangers and the bylaw officers, we have a fee. I think it's $250 to block the wharf. So let's say kids are swimming on the wharf, the ticket's going to be $250. Well, we're never going to give out that ticket because it's so big, and it really would have to be for a pretty egregious offense. And if you had tickets that as a first offense were much more moderate, and then you escalated when people didn't change their behavior, I think it'd be a more effective tool than having it so high that our staff are uncomfortable giving out those tickets in this situation.
I think it'd be fair to say in almost all our instances, we start with education as part of our bylaw process. This was the one again, and we had an incident down in Deep Cove in regard to a couple of bears, and the council response of the day was to go first time hard and charge for this to try to get some attention on it. So certainly can revisit it, and I'll bring back the numbers of what the tickets and what the amounts were.
Unfortunately, my experience is capturing seniors. It's capturing, it's really not what's intended to deal with, which is somebody who's intentionally leaving food scraps out. And so anyway, I think it would be a more effective tool to have a starting fee for that. But I'll be supporting the staff recommendation, but I hope there's an opportunity in November to look at those and the utility charges with a little more info. Did you, sorry, I didn't, you mentioned that the utility charges were going to be delayed. Is there a reason why the utility charges were delayed?
There's just additional analysis required this year. We've only recently received the numbers, so it's just going to take a little bit more time than we'd normally.
So this is that Metro Vancouver feeds most of the data into us for the utility fee charges, and that data is still being worked on?
We've just received it.
Just
Yeah.
received it. Okay. Thank you very much. And sorry, you had an additional comment?
Yes, Your Worship. I just wanted to follow up on your earlier point about materiality and wanted to let you know that we'll look at that and make sure that we highlight the changes that are material for council's review next year.
Appreciate that. Just wouldn't want to spend a lot of time discussing something that only had $50 in revenue in it or something else like that. So thank you very much. I'll be moving the staff recommendation. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Hanson, I've finished my comments. Councillor Hanson, do you have any additional comments?
No, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the presentation. I mean, I suppose I would simply emphasize that the charges overall, I appreciate you've increased some and other places you haven't increased them, but overall, the 5% increase is very much in line with inflation. And if those costs are, our costs as a district are rising to that degree, I do think it's only fair and just that those costs broadly be passed on to the user of these services in the form of these increases. So I consider this a fair proposal. Thank you.
Okay. Don't see any further. Oh, Councillor Forbes, your comments?
Thank you, Worship. I just have a question. The Ecology Center senior student volunteer fees, have we always charged that amount, $15 for that classification, or is that new?
I believe it's a new fee.
Sorry, the rec fees were from another list before, or is that one different?
That one's different.
Question kind of is, I don't know how the rest of council feels, but we're talking about seniors, students, and volunteers. So they're going to volunteer to come and pay $15 and work for us, but they have to pay to do that. So I kind of question why we're charging a fee there. Like it's students, seniors who can least afford it, and the volunteer.
Seniors can least afford it, but I will put it back to finance. Again, this is where that extra column might help. How much money do we derive from those sources?
Sorry, I think it's just the membership that's a new fee.
Yeah.
But then when you look at the membership fee, you go above that, and for
Which one?
family membership or an adult membership, it's 30. So I'm just kind of, we're not going to give seniors or students or volunteers a break. It's just a question. I mean, it's not a big deal, but I just wondered. If somebody comes up, and well, students won't, but if a senior comes in a car, they're gonna have to pay for parking, and they're gonna have to pay the Ecology Center if they're just volunteering and working there. It just seems like we're double dipping.
Through Your Worship, we can follow up on that with Parks. These charges have been reviewed with Parks with those thoughts in mind when it comes to public-private good, and certainly if we have volunteers coming in, we would take those types of things into consideration. But we can follow up with Parks and provide a response back on that. Sorry, I don't have an answer directly on that tonight.
Thank you. It's not a big deal. I just wanted to ask. And the other thing is, when you're talking about,
I'm gonna grab additional comment from Mr. Stewart before you move on.
This may just be a guess, but I think that's a discounted fee for just coming to the center as opposed to coming and working in the center that day. So if I wanted to visit it on Tuesday and I just wanted to visit it, I would pay that discounted rate. But if I came to work as a volunteer, then of course you wouldn't be charged. I would be surprised if that would be the case.
I don't know why we wouldn't just make it a matter of practice that volunteers get an annual pass, but you come and spend an afternoon and we get value out of you. It seems like that would be fair compensation for volunteers anyway. But I just wanted to be clear, So is there a seniors rate today? And this is just the exact same seniors volunteer student rate now being enforced through, just moved into the one bylaw for next year? Or is this a new category of rates? Do we know that information?
Your worship, I don't have that at my fingertips. Ms. Jones is just taking a look for us here.
Okay. Okay, well, if we, yeah, maybe their website would have that breakdown, but I don't fit into any one of those categories at this moment, so I don't know. Councillor Forbes, back to you.
Thank you. And just, you're recommending 5%, and that's sort of to pick up because of last year being excessively inflationary, and then your best guesstimate at what we would be looking at and trying to give us some wiggle room there. That I just want to make it clear that 1% between the 4% and we're actually the 5%, that has nothing to do with the 1% asset management.
Through your worship, that's correct.
I just wanted to make that clear because some people might look at 4 and 5 and think we brought that back in. Do you have any idea though when we're bringing it back in?
We'll have to through your worship, we'll have to monitor the financial position at the district. Right now, we're planning on 2025 is the first year where we reinstate that policy.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I see no further speakers from council.
We have questions online, Mayor.
Sorry, you're not in the, virtual speakers. I've got councillors Ma and Murray. Councillor Ma, go ahead.
Thank you. I know there were some questions posed earlier to the staff. I thought maybe with this, verbalize them for the benefit of the public. One question that was asked was, do you have a sense of what the average fees and charges increases in Metro Vancouver are?
Mr. Denlick?
Through your worship, we don't have that information at the moment. We have Vancouver's information. Obviously, that was released in the paper. We do work closely with the others, and they follow a similar practice as us. We're just a little ahead of the others at this time.
Can I just get clarification on this temporary outdoor business areas? Is that the outdoor patios?
Through your worship, Mr. Milburn is best able to answer this question.
Mr. Milburn?
Temporary outdoor patio is the outdoor business area. They're synonymous statements, the same area.
To be clear, I think the point Councilor Ma is referring to is that we have a new designation for a deep cove for that central area. This is not that. This is just immediately in front of any business throughout the district of North Vancouver. Is that correct?
That's correct.
There you go. Councilor Ma?
Okay, it kind of answered my question. Well, maybe I'll still ask it. For the Deep Cove merchants, will they have to pay a fee when they do their patio areas?
Your worship, yes, a fee. Once the specific boundaries are determined, a fee would be applied. It goes to the issue of assistance to business. If we provide any business access to a public good, we have to charge market rates for it, unless there's a specific exemption, such as through a partnering agreement, or as in the case for the temporary patios, there was a specific provincial order that allowed us to charge less fees for businesses for that purpose.
Okay, thanks for that. When that comes forward, I'm hoping that council will take it, consider some sort of justification to maybe waive it for the first year, given the challenges that they've had in that area. I just put it out there to see if that's something that can be worked in.
Thank you. Councilor Murray, your comments?
Thank you, Mayor Little. Mr. Cost does raise a good point that, through technology and the need or the will to find efficiencies within the operation, one would expect that the yearly increase in fees would be lessened. And I do recognize that not all the fees have gone up. But I just, wonder when they're just going to become prohibitive. You know, and do the fees going up actually increase to a better service delivery to the public? I mean, we talk about inflation, but you know, we raise fees every year. We're not raising them just because we had, you know, record inflation or COVID. We do this regularly. And I wonder when, for example, the trip to Maplewood Farm just no longer is affordable for the, you know, average family, because it's not $40 for a family of four. It's going to be 60 or 70 eventually if we keep raising fees. So, you know, I think we need to have a discussion about that. Obviously, there's things that need to go up, but the concept of just raising because of inflation and because other municipalities are doing it, or we're trying to keep in line with other municipalities. I mean, we're all very different. You know, what Surrey deals with is quite different from what we deal with in the municipality. I agree with the mayor in regards to having another column to really sort of illustrate, you know, what kind of fees we're deriving in total from these charges. But maybe we need to put another column in there too, or maybe we need to provide a report and a column on how these fees have changed over the years. We have a number of fees that don't even apply to us that are listed on the list. You know, bowling alley is one. We don't have any bowling alleys in the municipality. And then Mr. Koss asked me a question today in regards to signs, because he knows my passion for signs. And we were adding a two-sided rate to signs. And yet we've never produced two-sided signs, but we do produce bi-directional signs. And I spoke to staff today about it, and they concur that was an error in the description in the report. But we used to charge for one sign, then we added bi-directional signs. Now we're re-adding in the single sign. So, you know, I think it's an illustration that we sort of need to reflect on why we're doing these things, not just, you know, charging a fee or increasing a fee, but understanding why we're doing it, and maybe having a discussion on if we should omit one or just leave it and then add. Which brings me to the last comment that I have, Mayor Little, in regards to your comments about garbage and bears. And I would be really disappointed if quite simply council decided to go in an alternative direction before we consult with the Black Bear Society on if the behavior has changed based on these increase in fees. And I will say that I had a number of calls early on in this fee change from people that were ticketed because they put out their garbage early. And I think I should remind, you know, those that are listening in council that for years we have been trying to educate, as Mr. Joyce puts out or says, that we want people not to put their garbage out, you know, the night before, because we have such a huge bear problem. And this year we had a massive bear problem because, you know, they were scavenging, I think, because it was so dry and hot. There wasn't a lot of you know, berries up in the back country. We had a huge number of bears coming down. And but I had a number of people phone me because they did get ticketed early on. So I'm pretty concerned right now that you're saying that staff is not ticketing, because they were at the beginning. And I'm not sure what the change has been, because we were doing this because after 20 years of trying to educate, we still were in the same place with bears. They were dying, they were being killed. Conservation was putting them down because there was so many of them, because there was a food source, which was people's garbage. We have tried to educate over 20 or 30 years, and it wasn't working. So it's like, put your money where your mouth is. The fees were meant to discourage, and I get that it impacts people differently. But I need to understand why at the beginning, when this bylaw in the previous council was changed and there were people being ticketed, why all of a sudden your intel is saying that they're not being ticketed. So I hope that this is not, we're not just going to make this wholesale change without consulting and without understanding what this increase has done to behavior of residents, when staff stopped ticketing and fining, and why the direction of the previous council has waned from the beginning of the change to this bylaw. Thank you.
Yeah, and Councillor Miri, I jumped the gun on that a bit. That's going to be in the utility discussion on November 20th. It wasn't part of today's discussion officially, but in the year that the fee was brought in, we already were down to 5 bears shot, 3 because they were injured in car accidents and 2 because they were habituated to garbage. That's down from historical numbers in the 80s of about 25 to 30 bears being shot a year. And so we were already at a historic low at the time we removed we put it up to a $500 fee. Mr. Joyce, you have some additional comments?
I do, Your Worship. Just looking at Teams is great for real-time information now in our budget process. But we have zero tolerance and we have been ticketing. There's been over 1,500 tickets with just a reoffending rate at our current process of 6%. So it has been, as far as the numbers go, successful on that front.
So the reoffense rate before that change was 10%, and the reoffense rate after that change was 6%.
I've only got the 6%. I'll confirm the 10% when we come back with you. And also, as Councilor Murray points out, positions probably from North Shore Black Bear Society, the Conservation Officer Service. Councillor Forbes' comments. The Ecology Center is by donation. So we've been just checking the webpage here. So what that refers to in the schedule of fees is a membership, which is volunteer, should you wish to sign up as a volunteer student. And with that, you get access to some of the programs don't pay for, 15% off the gift shop, an e-newsletter. So there's a bunch of things you would get as part of that membership. So it's a small amount of money, but it's almost like a grant, if you will, or a donation. But you do get some services back from the Ecology Center for that donation.
Thank you very much. Mr. Danlock.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just following up on some of Councillor Mary's comments on the process itself. I just wanted to advise that when it comes to the annual review of fees and charges, having this vehicle, which we attach all these changes to in a single report, is a best practice. There's lots of municipalities trying to follow what we're doing, including the city of North Vancouver. But I will add, I agree with many of the comments that Councillor Murray said, in that we do need to have better information at our fingertips, better information on demand, better information on the cost of services. So we're always aiming to improve, and we'll continue to do that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hanson, comments?
Yeah, thank you very much. I guess I just want to emphasize in relation to in defense of a 5% raise, and there's the talk about, well, have we achieved efficiencies and so forth, and I respect that. At the same time, there's only one cost of government. The district has a certain set of expenses, and as I understand it, our inflationary pressures are actually greater as a district than an individual has borne. And of course, individuals are well aware that over the last year or so, inflation has been very significant. So if we don't raise these fees and charges, the point I'd like to remind us all is that whatever we don't collect in fees and charges will be borne by the general taxpayer. So that's why I'm sensitive to the fact that I feel this is a reasonable balancing between increasing these fees and charges and protecting the general taxpayer against the escalating cost of government. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stewart?
Just to add to that, Your Worship, it's also a lot easier to incrementally increase fees and charges than it is waiting for a number of years and then have to go back in and increase them very, very significantly. So that's also part of the rationale.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker I have is Councillor Back.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just to thank staff for their work and let you know that I do support this. I think generally 5% is reasonable, and that the incremental approach to increasing fees year over year is the best approach. Nothing really jumps out to me other than maybe being a parent of young kids and seeing the cost of birthday parties at some of these district-owned venues like the Maplewood Farm. But that might just be me, and haven't had to host a party yet for kids. But some, it does seem a little bit steep. When you look at $400 for a group of 16 to 25 kids. But regardless, I think that it's probably in line. And I know we're not debating the solid waste bylaw tonight, but I do want to just voice my concern in changing that drastically. I was one who supported the change to the high costs for first offense, and I too would want to hear from the Black Bear Society and our bylaw staff for more information to see how effective it's been. I know there was a lot of support in the community for that in saving the bears, so would want to see how effective it's been before making any decision to change it. But I do support this for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Murray, I see your hand, but you spoke for 6 minutes at the front end. Are you?
Well, I just wanted to add, sorry, I couldn't see the clock. I just wanted to add that my comments in regards to the increase is, I agree with growth pace for growth service. There has to be a fee attached to the service, and the service is going up, exponentially or based on inflation, then I'm in agreement of raising the fees, but not just because of inflation. There has to be an argument that the service needs to be increased because there's an impact within the municipality. And a permit fee going up. Why is the permit fee going up? Have we changed how we issue that permit, and the costs are increasing? So it's those kinds of rationales, not just, put it up because of inflation. So I appreciate Mr. Daniluk's comments in making sure that we look and review this.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes, second time speaker.
Just a quick note. I was also one of the people that voted in favor of the 500 for the bears. And it wasn't just Deep Cove. There was a bear a block away from me that got shot. And in on the other side of 29th, kind of close in my area, I could drive around there the night before garbage night, and the entire block would have their garbage cans out. So I think, as Councillor Murray said, I think the bears are going to be driven more and more down, and this is not the time we should back off on trying to do that. It took us a very long time. In speaking with the Black Bear Society, when I spoke to them, education, they do that free, and they'd be out there on the spot to educate the neighborhood, and you could come back there the next week and the garbage cans would be out. So I'd hate to see us let up on that, but I'm wondering then if you're seeing seniors caught in this, and I have seen some emails with this very sloped driveways, Upper Lonsdale. Some people have trouble with that. I wonder if there's a way that we could maybe leave the bear fee there, but as far as, I don't know, setting something up for seniors, or if you really can't get your garbage can out, if we could look at if there's anything the district could do in those cases, rather than just collapse down the fee for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see no further speakers at this time, so I'm prepared to call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 3.2. This is the 2023 to 2027 financial plan amendment number 1. Daniluk, your comments?
Thank you, Your Worship. We've got enough there. We recognize that the financial plan amendment, which happens typically each fall, and ideally would happen in the spring and fall, can be confusing. And so I wanted to say that right at the start. We are working on ways to make the process easier to understand. It should be relatively simple. In all municipalities, it is a little bit complex, and it is that way because we have these prior year bylaws that have been approved, and there are ways that we can explore to make sure that the plan that you're looking at is the whole plan. That's currently not the case. There are prior year bylaws that are still in effect, and it leads to some confusion in the presentation of the bylaw. So I'll go through that a little bit so to provide a little bit better context and understanding of what's in front of you. The changes that are highlighted in the report are shown in the slide here for reference. This has been a record year for the number of changes that have been processed. And I just wanted to recognize the two people in the room that have been coordinating and leading most of that. And that would be our section manager of financial planning, Sasha Jones, and our section manager of integrated planning, Victoria Grant Smith. There's a considerable amount of work that was undertaken this year to keep our plans current, and they deserve recognition for that work. If you simply focus on the net changes that are shown in table C and the 8.5 million in additional costs in the 2023 amendment column, you'll understand that we brought in additional funding for that amount. That source of funding was either approved in prior years or has been brought into the current year of the plan. For example, there was $1.6 million brought into the plan for the acquisition of land. There was $2.8 million in new revenue that was realized, revenue for the work that our fire services division did on wildfires. There was a grant that we were successful on for Delbrook Park Fieldhouse. There was another grant for Kate's Park shoreline restoration and various other transportation initiatives. So we're bringing in that funding, and there are also some projects that were brought forward from future years to the current year just to take advantage of the current marketplace. And in other cases, just to respond to demand. So there was increasing demand in some of the environmental work that we're undertaking through the Climate Office. The material changes are highlighted in the report, and so staff are here to answer any questions about those changes. As I said, it has been a record year for the changes through this amendment due to the financial situation that we find ourselves in.
Okay, thank you. Much like the last item, a dollar ain't a dollar anymore. The thing about inflation is it really is purchasing power you're talking about, that your dollar doesn't buy as many services anymore as that it used to. And so if you don't adjust your costs in line with inflation, then you are actually basically restricting your services from being able to match the growth in the community. So I see Councillor Forbes, you're up first in the speaking queue. Was that from before? Okay. I see Councillor Murray, you wanted to comment. Do you have a recommendation?
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you. I'll second. Councillor Murray, go ahead.
Thanks. And there were some letters that came in today. We've had some letters come in about, fields, like the ATF at Inter River, 1.72 million, and the number that was highlighted in the report, and Handsworth. And I'm just wondering if Mr. Daniluk comment on those two.
Please.
Yep. Thank you. Through your worship, Councillor Murray, in March of this year, Council adopted the financial plan bylaw, which included approximately $20 million in new funding for artificial turf fields. 10 million of that related to the Inter River field. And there were prior year budgets open at the time, so it's just a timing issue. We're just cleaning up old budgets and making sure that the current financial plan bylaw reflects council direction, which is Inter River field being approved at $10 million.
So this is not a change in the constructed date of the Inter River project in any way, shape, or form.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Murray, back to you.
And then Handsworth. I'm not sure if Mr. Joyce or who's more.
Mr. Joyce. Microphone, please.
Yeah, I can't hear him.
Through your worship, and I'll pick up Mr. Danilek's comments in the approval from council last March. We have $100,000 in this year's budget working with the school district on the Hansworth Field and currently scheduled in 2025 for $4.9 million. I will say, based on our experience with Argyle, it'll probably not get us there. So the staff team somewhere in 2024 or 25 will be back to council, look probably for additional funding.
Just on, thank you, Mayor Little. Just on those two issues, we've opened the new Argyle field, and for those that are playing on the field, they've enjoyed the surface and the facility. Can't say that for the immediate residents in the area. We've had a number of letters come in regards to the impact of late night usage, and I would say that we're going to have to maybe look at, if we can mitigate the sound at all, but certainly it's something that we're going to have to look at in regards to Hansworth, in that it sits in the middle of a residential neighborhood. And so, these kind of things, we need to look at the whole picture and not just the one single use. We need to look at the impact of the vehicle, the egress, the ingress. Like we need to look at Inter-River, for instance. We haven't even finished that field. It is going to be one of the highest used artificial fields in the district, and we have one way in and one way out. So we got to look at that, and now we're considering other applications in that area. Can Mr. Danilek just talk about item 44, existing capital? The ongoing maintenance costs of DNV assets have been moved from capital into operating to better capture the nature of this work. Could you just elaborate on that? And I'm sorry, I guess that's page 5 of the report.
No, I think you know where that is, right? Yeah. Go ahead, Mr. Danilek.
Thank you. Through your worship, the change in treatment for the capital maintenance items was an area that we identified during last year's year-end process. Really, these are ongoing expenses, and the amount rarely changes from year to year. And so we worked through a process with the engineering team to make sure that those costs were properly reflected in the bylaw, and that'll actually lead to some positive change through the year-end process. So we made the change for a number of reasons. one, it's the right place for it to be, and 2, it'll save us time and effort through the year-end process.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Danilek. Further, Mayor Little, I really want us to, we're looking at some big numbers in our tax increases. Metro's looking at big numbers. We're looking at big numbers. Everybody's looking at big numbers. And we have quite an extensive list of items that we need to look at. But I really hope that we make sure that we are, council is as involved in determining earlier on the direction that we're going in regards to capital infrastructure. I spoke with some of the soccer community this morning in regards to the field house at Inter-River. And the question they're asking is, why are we putting a field house up on the top fields as opposed to putting it more closer to the artificial turf field, which is really going to get the major usage versus the grass field. So I think we have to look at those kinds of things. And I think council, especially I think this council, would like to be more involved in that earlier, rather than just asking for approval of the capital funds needed to expedite those projects. But there is only one taxpayer, and it's getting to be even more unaffordable to live in this community and through the region. And I think we have to be very, very cognizant of that and careful how we spend the taxpayers' dollars. And finally, I'd just like to thank Mr. Danilek at the beginning, and I should have said this at the start, but thank you, Mr. Danilek, for recognizing that this document and this process is challenging and that it needs more work, and that you understand the challenge for the community and council to be able to take a document in a few meetings and really understand it. You guys do this all day long, every day for weeks and months, and we get a few meetings in a couple of hours with 6 minutes, and my time is counting down, and the mayor's going to remind me that I'm almost at the end of my discussion. But I would just like to say that shows, your experience and your tenure in this municipality. And I appreciate that experience, and I appreciate that admission that, none of us are perfect, and there's more work to be done. And you recognize the challenges that we have as the decision makers. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Next, I have Councillor Back.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Once again, thank you, staff, Mr. Danlick and your team for your work. Councillor Murray touched on a lot of the questions that I've been receiving as well around Inter-River and some of the delivery of the turf fields in general. So I want to just focus on transportation for a moment. A couple of the active transportation projects here that have deferrals on them. So the Lynn Valley Town Center to Lynn Creek route and Mountain Highway Arbor Lynn route. And just to staff, I'm wondering if we can get some clarification on around those and if they're actually being deferred or if that's changed or not. Thanks. From what was previously decided on. Thanks.
There's specific numbers that you're circling or just?
So it would, in table A, it would be lines 33 and 36 on page 61.
Thank you, Mr. Danlick. Further comments on 33 and 36?
Through your worship, when it comes to transportation priorities, we're certainly not changing any of the funding that's in the plan or the ongoing funding that's set aside for transportation. It's merely timing, and I'll refer to Mr. Cohen, I believe, or Mr. Joyce to elaborate.
Yeah, so through the mayor, just in terms of what you see in front of you, that's just really in relation to the cash flow situation for 2023. So it's not necessarily recognizing the full 5-year plan. We took direction from council earlier this year on the 5-year priorities for active transportation. They're all still on the plan to be delivered. This is just a recognition on where in that 5-year plan they're all landing. And this is just a bit of a cleanup process in terms of where everything landed back in May through the budget deliberation process.
I think the question though is, when are they going to happen if they're reprioritized? Because I got to tell you, this sounds like they're not proceeding. You're saying they're still going to proceed within the 5-year plan. They're just not currently on the list. Is that fair?
So through the mayor, these projects are in the $7.5 million that council approved for us to move forward in the active transportation for the 5-year plan. So they are in the 5-year plan. They are in the plan for what we presented to council in May. We have more of a discussion coming up in the council workshop in terms of timelines and likes as well. So
they just will not be constructed in the 2024 year. Therefore, they're not currently having funds applied to them. Is that correct?
Correct. Sorry, just to clarify through the mayor, these are 2023 numbers. And so in relation to moving funds around within the 2023 single year budget, there are planning works on all of these active transportation projects. I can get the exact dates and we can talk at 7 o'clock further in terms of the exact year for each of those active transportation items.
Thank you. Mr. Joyce, did you have additional comments?
Just your worship, I thought we may head this way as a group, that all questions as you dig into this table could be this is part of the workshop at 7 o'clock, where if council looks at the report submitted, you'll see the quarters, the years that we've got these projects coming up, and we're fully prepared to discuss those in the next workshop.
Okay. Thank you. I've got Councillors Forbes and Pope. Councillor Forbes, your comments?
I think Mr. Joyce was just trying to just stall me off now to the 7 o'clock workshop, but I'm still going to ask a question because we'll talk about it more in the workshop, but I just would like a clarification. People are getting in Lynn Valley, and people who are concerned about the active transportation in Lynn Valley are confused about when we talk about Lynn Valley Town Center to Lynn Creek Town Center East, then we talk about one west, then we talk about one bike route on Arbor Lynn. Mountain Highway, Arbor Lynn to Highway 1. Now, there's a survey that has been out, and today is the closing day for responses to a survey about that area, the Mountain Highway corridor. So in the workshop, I guess, I'm looking for clarification on the east, west, and Arbor Lynn, what it means, because we are just finishing a survey today. So how do we have numbers in here already? Is that based on something that we preliminarily designed if it goes ahead? Because people are talking about different routes. That would be my question in the workshop.
Owen?
I can recognize that some of these project titles may lead to some confusion, and through our project management framework, we are looking at how we can improve our project titling to make it a little bit more indicative. So just to give some clarity, the Eastern alignment is part of the Mountain Highway Safety Improvements that is currently out for engagement right now. So that is exploring what opportunities are there along Mountain Highway or potentially to the east as well as part of that discussion with the community. The Arbel into Highway 1 is essentially just that block north of the highway that was missed as part of the Highway 1 improvements project. And so we can see both that east side as well as Arbel in to Highway 1 being potentially one combined project once we go out to contractors. The Western alignment is west of Mountain Highway. So it's really looking at kind of more of those connections to the west as opposed to going north-south from Lynn Valley down to Lynn Creek.
Just the west,
To like the Kirkstone neighborhood, you're not.
city, correct? Line up with the, getting to the city? Do we have, I mean, what's happened with the city on that? Do you have any idea if they're still looking at the same thing we're looking at or not?
So through the mayor, we work very closely with our colleagues at the City of North Vancouver. And so any upgrades that we do as part of our active transportation network, we're in touch with them in terms of any updates they have in terms of their routes. We can have staff provide some more detail through a follow-up as well in terms of some updates on that.
Okay, so they haven't made or said any changes from where we were going before?
Through the mayor, no, you're correct. There's no updates significantly that we can share right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pope.
Thank you. I'll save my comments on the ATFs and the active transportation files for when we get into the workshop. But I just would like to pick up on the line 11 website redesign. Community engagement is one of our priorities. And I think we've all discussed this previously and hopefully more in the future about the website needing improvement. And I'm wondering why we're seeing in 2023 a reduction of 120,000 for website redesign. Or can you clarify what that's all about?
Mr. Danlock?
Yep, I believe that's just a reallocation from number 11 through to number 7 through the library, a technology upgrade, recognizing where those funds were going to be spent.
So this is not the District of North Van dnb.org webpage redesign. This is library's website redesign?
Yes.
There you go.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That's the clarification I need.
Yeah. Okay. I don't see any further speakers. Prepared to call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Aye.
Okay, council, so that was the business for the initial meeting. Mr. Stewart's got a quick comment.
Yes, your worship. Council may be aware that the province has issued some changes with respect to dealing with short-term rentals. And I thought if we had a little bit of time, Mr. Milburn could give council an update as to what those changes are and how they affect the bylaws that are under consideration at the district. And it'd be a good opportunity because the community may be listening in as well.
Mr. Milburn?
Thank you, Worship. A proposed provincial legislation called the Short-Term Rental Accommodations Act was announced by the province on October 16th. The act anticipates an increase in fines and strengthening tools for local governments, returning more short-term rentals to long-term homes, and establishing provincial rules and enforcement. This information is provided in further detail online, but does allow essentially an increase in fines from approximately a maximum of $1,000 up to $3,000 per infraction. It sets out a definition of what is an allowable short-term rental, that being one that is occupied by a principal resident. That's the first of its kind in its type of jurisdiction. And that's consistent with the general approach that council had discussed previously with the proposed bylaw amendments of the district. They've also proposed some very specific rules with respect to public notification and the tracking and registering of short-term rental businesses, and also a provincial enforcement office to assist with the enforcement of these rules. It is staff's belief that these are significant changes to provincial legislation that are anticipated to take effect in May of 2024. It's staff's recommendation, therefore, that the existing bylaws that have been under consideration by council and received a public hearing on October 10th be reviewed, and that staff bring back a new report with new bylaws in light of this change to provincial legislation. The one positive note is, given the timeline of implementation, staff believe that the described timeline for short-term rental regulations that staff provided previously can still be achieved even with a change to the bylaw. So fundamentally, this is an important and useful change the province is implementing, and staff are recommending that we revise the proposed bylaws and come back to council with new bylaws, which would require new public hearing and public meeting, and that we continue to pursue the online platform revenue as an opportunity, working with the Vancouver North Shore Tourism Association this year. Thank you, Worship. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Reelburn. I think we always knew that that was a possibility, that that there may be some confluence of their changes in our policy. I'm glad to see that for the most part, they're coming our direction in terms of us seeking out potentially owner-occupied suites and, primary residence suites. And so that was good to see. It's definitely something that appears to be fairly widespread in the community. The media coverage since that announcement has gone through all of the communities in BC. It seems like there's a little bit of pushback in the communities that are really tourist destination communities, but largely it has been supported in other areas as being a real challenge to creating long-term rental in those communities when you have such lucrative short-term rental as a viable option. And so hopefully with these changes, we'll be able to put some of those 25,000 short-term rental spaces back into the long-term sphere and help bring down rental prices for people in British Columbia. So, but we'll look forward to those amendments being proposed, and we will have to, as you say, go back through a public process for that. Councillor Muir, you have a report to make?
I just have a question in regards to the new hearing. You know, the examples of Vancouver and Victoria are those bigger tourism destinations. And I think they probably have a lot more multi-family units that act as short-term rentals. So I'm wondering if we can be provided with the information in regards to how many Airbnbs exist in single-family homes, be it the principal residence or the basement suite versus multifamily, because I just believe that these regulations are meant to apply as one size fits all, and it doesn't work necessarily that way in different municipalities. So I think we need a lot more information to be provided as part of that next round of hearings.
Thank you. Mr. Milburn, could we break that information down between those two areas?
If the information is available to us from our data provider, we can share that with council. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Would you like to make a report?
I just seek to clarify, given that we're now between a public hearing and a second and third reading. So am I to take it to conclude that the proposed bylaws are at an end and that we're no longer under any restriction in terms of communicating and seeking perspectives on this issue from the public?
Mr. Milburn.
Your worship, that's correct. I believe that the amendments proposed by the province are so significant that it justifies and requires really a reconsideration of the bylaws that have been before council, which means a new public hearing, a new public meeting, and therefore certainly the opportunity for the council engaging with members of the public, engaging with each other, engaging with staff. And as I said, we will bring back a new report to council with new recommendations and new bylaws. So it's essentially, it's a reset to the conversation because the amendments made by the province are so significant that we need to respond to them.
from a procedures perspective, does council need to formally roll it back to first or do anything with it, or it's just there scuttled and we start again?
Given that the changes proposed by the province go to land use, that necessitates a new public hearing and going back to first reading to amend the bylaws. The definition of principal, residence is a use definition, and therefore we're talking really about going back to first reading.
Thank you. Councillor Pope. Microphone, there we go. Yeah.
In terms of process, then, the people who have spoken at our public hearing on our previously proposed bylaw changes does that all become null and void? Would they have to come back again to add additional comments or change their previous comments? What if their comments remain the same as for both?
Can we transfer the meeting minutes from the first public hearing as an attachment to the next?
The information collected to date is a matter of record, and it's a matter of public record and can continue to be shared with council. The issue is that the actual content of the bylaw itself, we're recommending will likely change. And so members of the public may have different opinions about the change in wording. And so creating an opportunity for them to comment on that would be very helpful, I think.
Okay, and just if I could just follow up, I'm wondering, I realize you're going to bring us back a report if we vote in favor of that, but I'm wondering, can you give us a sort of, without taxing you too much in terms of the details, can you give us kind of a high level on how this would change our bylaws or what we've already proposed?
Your worship, I think the definition of principal residence would need to be amended to be generally consistent with the provincial approach. We can then enhance and further the regulations to create a higher level of limitation. But I think as a base, we need to start with the definition provided by the province. And the principal residence definition they provide in the Act is different than what is shown in the bylaw.
Yes, because their definition it includes a basement suite, whereas ours does not, correct?
Right. So we're recommending we start with that definition, which has more to do with the length of stay. So in the provincial definition, they talk about a residence in which you occupy longer than any other residence. So that's a specific type of definition. The question will come up again about whether or not a suite should be able to be rented despite it not being a principal residence. Staff's opinion on that has not changed. Staff continue to believe that we have over 6,000 of them, suites. They should be occupied as a principal residence. So that position and that opinion of staff has not changed, and the bylaws would reflect that. And that would be further limiting than what the province is proposing, which is acceptable. The province has said that the local governments can set higher standards or different standards, but it's good to start with a base, which is the definition of what is a principal residence, and then add to it. Additionally, I think we want to take advantage of the new fines opportunities. We need to take advantage of that. As well, I think it also goes to whether or not our annual license fee should be adjusted, and the amount of staff that we dedicate, I think, needs to be looked at because we're learning a lot as we go along about how communities are effectively enforcing the rules they have. And I think between what the province is offering in terms of resources, such as information about where these are all located. That's incredibly useful information. It means we have to be less detectives searching out and trying to find sites. We'll know where they are. And the obligation for them to identify the licensing on their advertisement, that kind of mirrors our bylaw. But all of those things, what we want to try to do is start with a base of matching the provincial law and then add to it as needed. Or take advantage of it as needed. So there will be changes likely to many of the bylaws that council's already seen.
And what would be your timeline on bringing that back?
Yeah, we hope to return that likely at the beginning of 2024 so that we could have a spring public hearing and then have it implemented concurrently with the timeline of implementation of the Act. We do want to be cautious that we realize the Act is currently just at first reading. So we want to make sure that is exactly what the province is going to approve, and then we don't have to amend our bylaws twice. So there is some coincidental timing with May that we think makes some sense.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. I really think it's a wonderful step forward by the province. And I think it's going to really help us in our job to try to increase rentals in the District of North Van.
Councillor Ma, you have a report?
I have a follow-up question. I thought Councillor Pope went where I wanted to go in terms of the definition of principal residence. I just want to clarify what I heard, that staff has not changed its opinion of principal residence. So it still believes definition of principal residence should be as per the earlier bylaw.
What I heard from staff was that we think that the principal residence definition should match. Is that correct?
The principal definition should match, but then what we're suggesting is that a secondary suite or coach house should also be a principal residence. So enhancing, starting with the base of the provincial definition, but then enhancing it so that it applies to secondary suites and coach houses. The province has, just for clarity, the province has suggested in their proposed legislation that a principal residence is the home. And then that means that an individual could then rent out a secondary suite, whether or not it was occupied by anyone else. And that was not staff's recommendation previously, and that will not be staff's recommendation going forward. We believe that the 6,000 plus secondary suites in the community should be occupied themselves individually as a principal residence, either by the owner or a long-term renter. And if that's the case, then they could be rented as a short-term rental. And again, as we come back with a new report to council, we'll visually express how this could be applied so council can see exactly what we're talking about. And I'm sorry, I don't have.
No, thank you. The intent tonight was just to make a report on it, that it is a material change from the provincial government and it is going to affect this legislation. We'll be able to provide more information soon. Any other reports? Okay, having completed the work of the meeting, I will accept adjournment if someone will propose it. Proposed by Councillor Forbes, accepted. Thank you very much to the staff for preparing the reports for our consideration today. Thank you for the members of the public for their comment, and thank you to council for coming to these decisions this evening. At this point, I will just say that the council workshop that we have scheduled for 7 o'clock, because it is officially scheduled for 7 o'clock and not simply to proceed following the first meeting, we now have a bit of a break. So council, you've got about 40 minutes to stretch your legs, grab a bite to eat, and then we'll resume with council workshop at 7 o'clock. Good night.